All right, Chris Herren, welcome to the podcast, man. I am very, very excited to have you here, and thank you for being with us.
No, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And I would love to start this thing off if you could kind of give people and paint people a little bit of a picture of like what was life like for little Chris growing up?
Um, it was hectic, right? I grew up in an alcoholic home. My parents, it was very evident at a young age that our family was slowly pulling away from the unit. My father's alcoholism definitely was on a fast track, and I witnessed that through my mother's eyes and her voice. But also there was another part of me that was heavily involved in basketball and extremely motivated and highly sought after.
Yeah.
I started getting recruited at a young age, and I realized, probably around 8th grade that, every time I played, I was subjected to critique and observation. So, that was a lesson I learned pretty young.
Yeah. Do you remember the first day picking up a basketball? Do you remember that day?
No, I don't. Most of my basketball was probably played on a coat hanger stuck in the top of my bedroom door and a sock rolled up. That's the
That's
basketball.
The secret.
Yeah. That's the basketball.
Get the sock.
It was just always part of my life. My brother was a really good basketball player. My dad played basketball. It definitely was in the lineage and of both my dad's side and my mom's side. So, it was always a big part of my life.
And do you think it was something that almost unconsciously you didn't necessarily even pick? It was just a matter of like, my brother does it, my dad does it. Clearly there's love around this thing, so I'm going to just do it. Do you think that was kind of a early inception?
Yeah, no doubt. I didn't choose it for sure. I was kind of guided in that direction. But I also played sports like soccer and baseball, and that was boring to me. I didn't find enjoyment out of playing shortstop and get every 3 innings. So basketball was something that was appealing to me. The action, the competition. It's just when I became such a focal point around basketball is when the love of basketball started to kind of go away.
Was it not? It wasn't like, I'm going to do this for fun anymore. It was like, I'm going to do this because Mary Jo and John are saying this about me and I got to change this so they say something better about me. And
it wasn't even from that standpoint. It's just people started showing up to watch. So I felt as if I was always expected to perform at a high level. And, at a young age,
it's a lot of pressure.
That it could be very wearing at times, and then when the college coaches started to show up with clipboards and taking notes, I knew that I was being evaluated and judged and critiqued and kind of picked apart. And I think any adult who, has their boss or, anyone on their staff who are critiquing their performance at work would be under a high amount of stress. That process begins for us at 14.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing you say that, and like kind of what pops into my head is one of the things, because I do similar performance-based things where it's like basketball, you're all performance-based. You perform well, you score the points, you have the assists, you're going to make it. And one thing that I've noticed that's been such a silver lining in my life, and it's funny that it comes from Michael Jordan, right? As he said, they asked him like, why are you so great? Why are you so every single year you get better? And he said, well, every single day I wake up and I don't try to compete with anybody else other than myself. And I think it's interesting that, for someone that maybe is listening to this and they're going through something and they have their parents that are looking at them or someone else that's having these expectations of them, rather than saying, how can I do this to meet their expectation, asking yourself, how can I do this to beat myself yesterday? How can I do this to become an even better version of myself? And if you can look at it in that way, then in that process, one, you're probably going to get better because you're comparing to yourself. And two, you may be able to alleviate a little bit of the pressure.
Yeah, but I also think fundamentally it stops being, so I was giving, some God-given talent, right, to play basketball.
Yeah, totally.
And I had, for a kid my size, probably a unique athletic ability. But I wasn't given the ability to cope. I wasn't given the skills to converse about, my emotional health. And I think if you're going to compete against yourself, that has to be in the narrative. That has to be part of it. Because you can only sustain it and hold on to it so long. Like we can aim for the Michael Jordans of the world, but there's only one Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And trust me, I get that. I get, I fell asleep to posters on my wall too when I was a kid and wanted to be like Mike, be like Larry. But for me, like I wish somebody grabbed me in high school and said, you have this dream to be a professional athlete. I want to show you how to be a pro at being you. Like, I want to show you what it's like to be a pro at being yourself. And, you've mastered, you've practiced enough. The game of basketball has now began to come easy. But being you was extremely difficult. And if I had that ability to be in touch with myself and to kind of shoot my jumpers with my emotional health, then I would have been much better off as a basketball player.
Yeah. What would you say is like one of the ways that if someone's kind of in that same place where they're not as touch emotionally with kind of what's going on the inside, what would you say is like a good step they can take to move in that direction? Like, what would you go back and?
I would grab people, who I looked up to. It's about identifying with people, right? Not comparing. And I think for me, it would be to find someone in my circle of life, in my network that, I could sit down and have, heart to heart conversations. And I did at times. A guy wrote a book about me when I was 17 years old. His name is Bill Reynolds. He was hyper aware of my situation. The problem is at 17 years old, I didn't know how to communicate, some of my emotions, feelings, pressures, stress. And that's why I do what I do today around prevention, right? Because I think when it comes to drugs and alcohol and emotional well-being and mental injury and mental health, there's so much focus on the worst day and not the first day. We talk about what drugs and alcohol and mental health is going to look like in the end, if not treated, rather than why it's beginning. So, the understanding of oneself at a young age and being able to do some self-reflection and work on one's, mental health and overall social and emotional wellness, I think is critical.
Yeah, it's interesting. And one of the podcasts I was listening to and doing some research on you, one of the really interesting things I heard you say is, you I don't have any kids, you have kids, right? But it's like they come home and if you have someone that's a kid or even yourself and you're drinking or you're doing this, so many parents go, how come you did this? Or they start talking about like the bad things or the good things, but people don't really ask, why did you feel that you needed to do that? And I thought that was such an interesting thing because when you ask, why did you do that? it can go really deep.
Yeah, it's a different answer, right? I mean, like
Totally.
the general questions when kids come home under the influence of alcohol or drugs at 14, 15, 16 years old, the focus tends to be on the external stuff, right? Like, where'd you buy it? Who got it for you? Whose house were you at? How much did you do?
Yeah.
What did you do? And not why did you do it? And I think the why is a critical question that parents have failed to discuss for years. And again, if someone asked me why when I was in 8th grade getting high or drunk, I probably would have said, if I had the ability to communicate and talk about it, and there wasn't so much fear and shame attached to it, I probably would have said my father's alcoholism, has me extremely concerned that my family is going to fall apart. And, that plays a huge factor in my emotional health. Along with the fact that, because I'm a good basketball player, people have unbelievably high expectations of me, and I don't want those expectations.
Interesting. Do you remember the day that, if there was this day, the day that was like, I want to be a professional basketball player? Do you remember? Did that happen?
No, see, like I wasn't that type of kid, right? Like I wasn't,
yeah.
I wasn't growing up saying I'm going to be in the league one day, right?
Yeah.
I grew up to play high school basketball, and I grew up to follow my brother's footsteps. And then, as I went out into the world of AAU basketball, I started getting recruited heavily. And, I stepped onto a college campus and I was part of something at Boston College. Didn't last long because of drugs. And then I flew out to Fresno, and I had a couple of coaches out there that believed in me and said, if you do this, I can get you to the league. So
it was almost incepted through the people you were around.
Yeah, I became a believer of myself at, for the next level, probably my sophomore, junior year of college. That's when I started to see, wait, this could be a possibility.
And what made you start believing in yourself?
Because I started busting people's ass. That's why.
And let's get into a little bit of the details. So what does busting someone's ass look like?
Just giving them the work, like just applying, the countless hours in the gym and applying that, in game and putting up big numbers on a big stage. Right. So that's when I started to think, like, wait a second, I was in college, I was playing against Duke, I was giving them the business. They had 5 NBA basketball players on that team. Playing against UNLV with Keon Clark and Sean Marion and Tyrone Nesby. I played against a lot of future pros, and the fact that, I could compete on that stage at that level. It started being quite evident that, I could possibly continue.
Yeah. When you went to Fresno, did you believe? Like when you went to Fresno, did you believe?
No, I didn't believe I was a pro when I was at Boston College. I didn't believe I was going to be a pro when I went to Fresno.
And so was it a lot to do with your coach then? Because I know the coach at Fresno, I'm giving you your second chance, man. We're starting fresh. You're starting fresh. Let's do this. And it sounds like he was a big part of bringing that belief into you to a new level. Yeah.
Johnny Welch. Johnny Welch is the assistant coach I'm referring to. He's, after Fresno, he went on to the NBA. He's been with the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Kings. Johnny Welch showed me the possibilities. He gave me all the tools. He taught me, what it took to get there, and the commitment. And, if it wasn't for him, I would have never been a pro. I say that all the time. If I didn't have a John Welch in my life, there was no NBA for me. I probably would have been, a pretty good competitive Division I basketball player.
Yeah.
He made me.
Yeah. I think one of the really interesting things there too is, like, someone once told me, if you don't believe in me believing in you. And I think it's like, if you're in a place where you're not sure what you want to do with your life, or you're trying to figure out, or you have an idea, but you don't know if you're good enough and you can really make it to the quote unquote big league of whatever league you're playing in. It's like, if you can get around somebody that believes in you, that'll be the biggest thing. Like, when I first became like an entrepreneur, I guess you could say, I used to have a mentor, sort of like John, and I hated public speaking. It was my biggest fear. I was like, I will never get in front of the room. But I had someone around me being a champion for me, saying, you got this, you can do this. And eventually that person says that enough times around you that you start to go, wait, can I actually do this? And then you start to do it and you go, holy crap, not only can I do this, but I'm like good at this. And then eventually one day you're like, wow, I can be in the big leagues. And I think it's such a huge thing to have those people around you. And even what you're doing with like Herren Project and all that, it's all about how can you use the community around you to really build you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's applicable in recovery, right? Like, you walk into a meeting and you're a newcomer. 13 years ago, I walked into an AA meeting, and I was lost. I was rudderless. I had no anchor to life. Stability was not even a thought.
Yeah.
And I started following guys who knew how to do it. Guys who sounded really healthy, who rebuilt their life and reconnected their family and flourished. And, so I surrounded myself with those people. And, like I tell people all the time at my wellness center, my whole life, I wanted to compete with the best. I wanted to play with the best. I wanted the best teammates. And that has to be applicable in life, in recovery. You want to challenge yourself. You want to be with people who are going to be champions of you. And not only that, you also want them to be coaches. I don't want to be around people who aren't going to coach me, or people who are afraid to coach me. I think we all need coaches in our life. Yeah.
So let's go back then to, it was 1999. You get drafted, you get picked up by the Denver Nuggets. I'm curious for you, what was going through your head at that moment? Like, you've been through all these things, the trials and tribulations, Boston College, then to Fresno, like, you finally, quote unquote, make it. Like, what's going through your head that day?
It's just another mountain to climb, brother. It's another, I mean, that's what it really is. It's just another mountain to climb. It's as beautiful as it is. And as, it's very fleeting. It's like the 33rd pick in the NBA draft is Chris Herren. That's great. Let's party. Let's celebrate. But now, I need some Sherpas in my life that are going to get me over that mountain. And thankfully, I had amazing teammates. I had amazing coaches, Dan Issel, John Lucas, Chauncey Billups, Antonio McDyess, George McLeod, Roy Rogers, Popeye Jones. I mean, Bryant Stith. I mean, high character guys.
Yeah.
That were at in the Denver locker room, and I was very fortunate to have them early on.
I love that. And so you did celebrate a little bit, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but again, it's fleeting. It's temporary. It's like shit. Now I have to prove myself again. I mean, I think, you're in a constant. You my whole life, it's been a series of mountains.
Right.
And it's and you got to climb them.
Yeah, I think one really something that I'm hearing there is, like, we often in times in life, we go, when I do this, I'm going to be happier. When I get here, I'm going to make it. And it's so interesting that oftentimes, like, if you think about a situation, like you get drafted to the NBA or something, it's like, sometimes when we accomplish these big things, it's not a year that we're like, oh my God, that was awesome. It's not 2 months. It's usually not even 2 weeks, not even 2 days. Maybe it's like 2 hours. You're like, yes, let's go. I did it. On to the next thing. And one of the biggest things for me where my life was shaped in learning this lesson in like a real process of my life was, rather than saying, when I make it to the NBA, I'm going to feel worthy, or when I make it here, then I'm going to feel accomplished. It's like, or when I get there, I'm going to feel happy. It's like, well, at the end of the day, when you get there, you're the person that then decides, I've made it. Now I feel happy, accomplished, etc. So why not feel that now? And then when you get there, you get to celebrate a little bit, but you didn't have to wait however long it takes you to get to your goal to then feel that thing. Like you can feel it today.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, listen, like, post basketball, I mean, I'm constantly, stepping in front of a mountain, right? I mean, it's whether I'm opening companies and starting businesses and buying property, there's always something that, I have to compete against. Today at 45 years old, I enjoy the climb. Right. Back then I thought I had to sprint the mountains. And I look back and I wish I enjoyed, the time I spent, and the work and the accomplishments that I was able to, endure back then.
Yeah. Crushed it.
But it's you're either climbing or you're in the valley, right? And I think like right now I just opened up 2 centers and I'm feeling good, and I'm kind of in the valley, and what's the next mountain gonna be?
I love it. So there's this quote that I've heard a lot recently, and it says there's the 2 most important days of your life: the day you're born and then the day you figure out why. And I'm curious for you, you go through your entire career, eventually you go start playing overseas. You have this incredible basketball part of your life where you made it, right? You did the thing, and you did extraordinarily well. And in that process, obviously you were dealing with the addiction and all these different things. And at some point it sounds like maybe there was a light bulb that clicked on and went, maybe basketball wasn't the reason I was born, but maybe it's some of the stuff you're doing now. And I'm curious, like for you, if you had to kind of analyze that quote in your life, the 2 most important days, the day you're born and the day you figure out why, what would you say maybe that day was for you?
I would say the moment that I saw sobriety in my children's eyes, that the happiness, the relief, the peace, the comfort that my recovery was able to give my children. My 2 oldest were 9 and 7 when I got sober. They were very well aware of what my heroin addiction not only did to myself, but did to us as a whole, as a family. And when I started seeing my sobriety in their eyes, that's when I realized that I had something priceless. Something that money couldn't buy, and the most special gift that I've ever been given. It's hard to see that in yourself, but when you see it in others, and when I saw my recovery and my sobriety in my children, that was one of those moments for me.
Yeah. They say you'll do more for others than you'll ever do for yourself. And it sounds like that was one of those moments where it was like, you can't put your kids through that. Like you could put yourself through it, but to do it to your kid, it's like, that's the switch.
Yeah. I mean, listen, recovery is hard work, right? Like, people, I've said this before, like my whole life, for as long as I can remember, I wanted relief. And the reality is it's not like I always knew exactly what from, but I knew I needed relief. And for years, that came in the form of drugs and alcohol. And the fact that, coming up in August, it will be 13 years without,
Yeah.
Is quite, and it's an unbelievable accomplishment. But it requires repetition. It requires monotony. Like I tell people all the time, like, if you want to be good at being sober, get ready for monotony, because it's very monotonous. You're around, you hear a lot of the same stories. But the reality is, to me, I shot 1,000 jumpers at the same rim every day.
Yeah.
It's pretty monotonous.
Yeah.
I did in the same weight room. I played with the same teammates. So, I think there's a lot of monotony on the way to success, and you have to settle into that. And the repetition and the monotony that comes along with it is something that, because of basketball and because of my athletic background, I've become very good at.
Right. What's a piece of advice you would give to someone who says maybe listening to this and maybe they're currently struggling with addiction? Like what's something you would share with them?
I think it's unbelievably important to find someone in your life that you can share that with. And I would tell them that, don't believe, the voice in your head right now saying that life is over, that you are too far gone, the hole is too deep to come out of. It's the furthest thing from the truth. There was a time in my life where I didn't think recovery or sobriety was even worth it because I could never, ever come back from it. Recovery has given me an unbelievable advantage in all areas of my life. I am who I am 24/7, and not everybody can say that. And, my self-awareness and my awareness of others, my empathy and my understanding of people's struggles and success, recovery has given me those gifts. So, unfortunately, the stigma around addiction tells you, it's over. Life is over. You're too old, too much damage. And it's not true. It's not true at all. And, it's the greatest accomplishment of my life. It's what I cherish the most. And I think, if my children came on this podcast, they would ask you, what's the most important part of your family? And they would say, my dad's recovery.
Love that. Love it. Love it. Well, Chris, this has been an invaluable conversation. I thank you so much for being here. I'm curious if people want to get more info on you, see what you're up to with everything you're doing. Where's the best place to find you?
Herren Talks, Herren Project, Herren Wellness. That's the three companies. Herren Project is my nonprofit that has done amazing work for people who are struggling. And not only them, but their families. Herren Wellness is my center, residential center, focused on substance use and mental health. And Herren Talks is my speaking platform, where I around and do presentations, not only about recovery, but about prevention and education. So, I'm not hard to find, and anyone listening, could identify today, there's definitely a way to get in touch. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And one last question I got for you, Chris. I ask this to every guest because we're all about helping people find direction, but we're a believer it's through execution, right? Not just sitting on a couch saying, I'm going to figure it out, but like going out and doing something. And so I would be curious for you, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life? And to give you a little time to think, it doesn't have to be one thing figure out the next 50 years, but even the next year or two or 6 months or a couple months.
Yeah, I think you have to identify goals. I think it's very important to identify, and set some goals around you. And, nothing's achieved on a couch, I mean, and that's why, no, I mean, like success, there's a lot of work to it. And I tell my kids all the time, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan, every time you see them raise a championship trophy, they're crying. And those tears are because, they're relief of the hard work that they had to put into it. So to anyone listening, don't fool yourself and say it's not hard. But execute and be real to yourself and set some goals to start aiming for.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, Chris, again, it's been a pleasure to have you here, man. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're very, very busy. So thanks so much for adding so much value and just being here with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon.